a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy.
Maldives. The Maldives, officially the Republic of Maldives, is a South Asian island country located in the Indian Ocean, situated in the Arabian Sea. It lies southwest of Sri Lanka and India. The chain of 26 atolls stretches from Ihavandhippolhu Atoll in the north to the Addu City in the south, comprising a territory spanning roughly 298 square kilometers. The Maldives is one of the world's most geographically dispersed countries, as well as the smallest Asian country by both land area and population, with around inhabitants. Malé is the capital and most populated city, traditionally called the King's Island for its central location. The Maldives archipelago is located atop the Chagos-Maldives-Laccadive Ridge, a vast submarine mountain range in the Indian Ocean, which also forms a terrestrial ecoregion, together with the Chagos and the Lakshadweep. With an average ground level elevation of 1.5 meters above sea level, it is the world's lowest country, with even its highest natural point being the lowest in the world, at 2.4 meters. Due to the consequent risks posed by rising sea levels, the government pledged in 2009 to make the Maldives a carbon-neutral country by 2019. The Maldivian archipelago took to Islam in the 12th century and consolidated as a sultanate, developing strong commercial and cultural ties with Asia and Africa. From the mid-16th century, the region came under the increasing influence of European colonial powers, with the Maldives becoming a British protectorate in 1887. Independence from the United Kingdom was achieved in 1965 and a presidential republic was established in 1968, with an elected People's Majlis. The ensuing decades have been characterized by political instability, efforts at democratic reform, and environmental challenges posed by climate change. The Maldives is a founding member of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. It is also a member of the United Nations, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the Non-Aligned Movement. The World Bank classifies the Maldives as having an upper-middle income economy. Fishing has historically been the dominant economic activity, and remains the largest sector by far, followed by the rapidly growing tourism industry. Along with Sri Lanka, it is one of only 2 South Asian countries rated high on the Human Development Index, with its per capita income one of the highest among SAARC nations. The Maldives was a Commonwealth republic from July 1982 until its withdrawal from the Commonwealth in October 2016 in protest of international criticism of its records in relation to corruption and human rights. Toponymy. The name, Maldives, may derive from the Malayalam words and or the Tamil and or in Sinhala. The Maldivian people are called Divan. The word means island, and Dives means islanders. The ancient Sri Lankan chronicle Mahawamsa refers to an island called in Pali, which is probably a mistranslation of the same Sanskrit word meaning garland. Jan S. Hojendorn, Grossman, professor of economics, theorizes that the name Maldives derives from the Sanskrit meaning garland of islands. In Tamil, garland of islands can be translated as. In Malayalam, garland of islands can be translated as. In Kannada, garland of islands can be translated as. None of these names is mentioned in any literature, but classical Sanskrit texts dating back to the Vedic period mention the 100,000 Islands, a generic name which would include not only the Maldives, but also the Laccadives, Amanadevi Islands, Minicoy, and the Chagos Island groups. Some medieval travelers such as Ibn Battuta called the islands from the Arabic word, which must be how the Berber traveler interpreted the local name, having been through Muslim North India, where Perso-Arabic words were introduced. to the local vocabulary. This is the name currently inscribed on the scroll in the Maldives state emblem. The classical Persian, Arabic name for Maldives is. The Dutch referred to the islands as the, while the British anglicized the local name for the islands first to the Maldive Islands, and later to Maldives. Garcia da Horta writes in his conversational book first published in 1563 as follows. I must tell you that I have heard it said that the natives do not call it Maldiva, but Nalediva. In the Malabar language Nail means four and Diva island, so that in that language the word signifies four islands, while we, corrupting the name, call it Maldiva. Ancient history and settlement. The first Maldivians did not leave any archaeological artifacts. Their buildings were probably built of wood, palm fronds and other perishable materials, which would have quickly decayed in the salt and wind of the tropical climate. Moreover, chiefs, or headmen, did not reside in elaborate stone palaces, nor did their religion require the construction of large temples or compounds. Comparative studies of Maldivian oral, linguistic and cultural traditions and customs confirm that the first settlers were people from the southern shores of the neighboring Indian subcontinent, including the Jura of Aru people mentioned in ancient legends, and local folklore about the establishment of the capital and kingly rule in Malé. A strong underlying layer of Dravidian population and culture survives in Maldivian society, with a clear Tamil Malayalam substratum in the language, which also appears in place names, kinship terms, poetry, dance, and religious beliefs. Malabari seafaring culture led to the settlement of the islands by Malayali seafarers. The earliest written history of the Maldives was marked by the arrival of Sinhalese people in Sri Lanka and the Maldives circa 543 to 483 BC. As reported in the Mahavansa, their settlement marks a significant change in demographics and the development of the Indo-Aryan language to Veri language. Buddhist period. Despite being just mentioned briefly in most history books, the 1,400-year-long Buddhist period has a foundational importance in the history of the Maldives. It was during this period that the culture of the Maldives as we now know it both developed and flourished. The Maldivian language, the first Maldive scripts, the architecture, the ruling institutions, the customs and manners of the Maldivians originated at the time when the Maldives were a Buddhist kingdom. Buddhism probably spread to the Maldives in the 3rd century BC at the time of Emperor Ashoka's expansion, and became the dominant religion of the people of the Maldives until the 12th century AD. The ancient Maldivian kings promoted Buddhism, and the first Maldive writings and artistic achievements, in the form of highly developed sculpture and architecture, are from that period. Nearly all archaeological remains in the Maldives are from Buddhist stupas and monasteries, and all artifacts found to date display characteristic Buddhist iconography. Buddhist temples were mandala-shaped. They are oriented according to the 4 cardinal points, the main gate being towards the east. Local historian Hassan Ahmed Manikou counted as many as 59 islands with Buddhist archaeological sites in a provisional list he published in 1990. Islamic period. The importance of the Arabs as traders in the Indian Ocean by the 12th century may partly explain why the last Buddhist king of Maldives Dovemi converted to Islam in the year 1153, adopting the Muslim title of Sultan Muhammad al-Adil, and initiating a series of 6 Islamic dynasties that lasted until 1932. When the Sultanate became elective, the formal title of the Sultan up to 1965 was Sultan of Land and Sea, Lord of the 12,000 Islands and Sultan of the Maldives, which came with the style Highness. The person traditionally deemed responsible for this conversion was a Sunni Muslim visitor named Abu al-Barakat, stemming either from the Maghreb, from the Somalian port of Berbera, or from the Persian town of Tabriz. His venerated tomb now stands on the grounds of Hukura Mosque, or Miski, in the capital of Malé. Built in 1656, this is the oldest mosque in Maldives. Following the Islamic concept that before Islam there was the time of Jahiliyyah. In the history books used by Maldivians, the introduction of Islam at the end of the 12th century is considered the cornerstone of the country's history. Compared to the other areas of South Asia, the conversion of the Maldives to Islam happened relatively late. Arab traders had converted populations in the Malabar coast since the 7th century, and Muhammad bin Qasim had converted large swathes of Sind to Islam at about the same time. The Maldives remained a Buddhist kingdom for another 500 years after the conversion of Malabar coast, and Sind perhaps as the southwesternmost Buddhist country. Arabic became the prime language of administration, and the Maliki school of jurisprudence was introduced, both hinting at direct contacts with the core of the Arab world. Middle Eastern seafarers had just begun to take over the Indian Ocean trade routes in the 10th century and found Maldives to be an important link in those routes as the first landfall for traders from Basra sailing to Southeast Asia. Trade involved mainly cowrie shells, widely used as a form of currency throughout Asia and parts of the East African coast, and coir fiber. The Bengal Sultanate, where cowrie shells were used as legal tender, was one of the principal trading partners of the Maldives. The Bengal-Maldives cowrie shell trade was the largest shell currency trade network in history. The other essential product of the Maldives was coir, the fiber of the dried coconut husk. Resistant to salt water, it stitched together and rigged the dhows that plied the Indian Ocean. Maldivian coir was exported to Sindh, China, Yemen, and the Persian Gulf. Colonial period. In 1558, the Portuguese established a small garrison with a viador, or overseer of a factory in the Maldives, which they administered from their main colony in Goa. Their attempts to impose Christianity provoked a local revolt led by Muhammad Taqurufanu al-Azam and his two brothers, that 15 years later drove the Portuguese out of Maldives. This event is now commemorated as National Day. In the mid-17th century, the Dutch, who had replaced the Portuguese as the dominant power in Ceylon, established hegemony over Maldivian affairs without involving themselves directly in local matters, which were governed according to centuries-old Islamic customs. The British expelled the Dutch from Ceylon in 1796 and included Maldives as a British protected area. The status of Maldives as a British protectorate was officially recorded in an 1887 agreement in which the Sultan accepted British influence over Maldivian external relations and defence while retaining home rule, which continued to be regulated by Muslim traditional institutions in exchange for an annual tribute. The status of the islands was akin to other British protectorates in the Indian Ocean region, including Zanzibar and the Trucial States. In the British period, the Sultan's powers were taken over by the Chief Minister, much to the chagrin of the British Governor-General, who continued to deal with the ineffectual Sultan. Consequently, Britain encouraged the development of a constitutional monarchy, and the first constitution was proclaimed in 1932. However, the new arrangements favoured neither the aging Sultan nor the wily Chief Minister, but rather a young crop of British-educated reformists. As a result, angry mobs were instigated against the constitution, which was publicly torn up. Maldives remained a British Crown protectorate until 1953, when the Sultanate was suspended, and the First Republic was declared under the short-lived presidency of Muhammad Amin Didi. While serving as Prime Minister during the 1940s, Didi nationalized the fish export industry. As President, he is remembered as a reformer of the education system and a promoter of women's rights. Muslim conservatives in Malé eventually ousted his government, and during a riot over food shortages, Didi was beaten by a mob and died on a nearby island. Beginning in the 1950s, the political history in Maldives was largely influenced by the British military presence in the islands. In 1954, the restoration of the Sultanate perpetuated the rule of the past. 2 years later, the United Kingdom obtained permission to re-establish its wartime RAF Gun airfield in the southernmost Addu Atoll, employing hundreds of locals. In 1957, however, the new Prime Minister, Ibrahim Nazir, called for a review of the agreement. Nazir was challenged in 1959 by a local secessionist movement in the three southernmost atolls that benefited economically from the British presence on Gan. This group cut ties with the Maldives government, and formed an independent state, the United Suvadev Republic, with Abdullah Afif as president, and Hidadu as capital. 1 year later the Suvadev Republic was scrapped after Nazir sent gunboats from Malé, with government police, and Abdullah Afif went into exile. Meanwhile, in 1960 the Maldives had allowed the United Kingdom to continue to use both the Gan and the Hidadu facilities for a 30-year period, with a payment of £750,000 over the period of 1960 to 1965, for the purpose of Maldives' economic development. The base was closed in 1976 as part of the larger British withdrawal of permanently stationed forces east of Suez.
Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Would you like to know more?